Hi, I'm Jesse. I've got some help today from my puppy named Steven. My son Asher the Basher named him presumably after his favorite martyr, whose story is in the book of Acts. Speaking of Acts, we're in chapter 21, beginning in verse 26. So the next day, Paul took them in, having purified himself along with them, and entered the temple, announcing the completion of the purification days when the offering would be made for each of them. When the 7 days were nearly over, some Jews from the province of Asia saw him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd, and seized him, shouting, "Fellow Israelites, help! This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against our people, our law, and this place. What's more, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. So Paul has come in to observe a ritual, perhaps, I believe, in the sense that Messianic Jews would observe an ancient feast. All right, he's not making sacrificial offerings that were foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Messianic Jews don't observe such things. I once had a dear friend, an Orthodox Jew, come to know Christ, and then in observing some of the traditions with his family around the Passover would abstain from, for example, one glass of wine that is drank in anticipation of the Messiah to come, because to drink that would suppose the Messiah hasn't come. I believe that Paul would observe these kinds of festivals and rituals out of posterity and a sense of heritage, not in any way that would pretend like Christ hadn't come. If he had, Paul arguably would have sinned by doing this. Now, the larger picture of the text is this riot that's about to break out. Can you relate to this at all? People have utterly misrepresented what Christianity is, and they've just outright falsely accused Christians of certain things. This is nothing new to Christianity. Christians have been persecuted for various reasons. We've been accused of cannibalism because of communion, incest because brothers and sisters in Christ would marry each other, atheism because we disavow all other gods. That's not quite consistent on the last one, but all the others are made up too. This is an absolutely trumped up charge. They just saw a dude named Trophimus with Paul, and they just assumed he had brought Trophimus into the temple, and they accused him of defiling the temple. So that charge is outright made up. The others kind of carry over, I believe, from what the Jerusalem elders had released. When Paul meets with the Ephesian elders, we see that everything's good. Right? Paul has some warnings for them about false teachers to come, but they love Paul and they affirm Paul. But the Jerusalem elders, with their preferential personal convictions, bringing back Old Testament dietary laws and making those recommendations to the churches, though well received at first, would eventually go on to lead to some confusion in the church. They also throw in this little charge. If I can go back one devotion, in verse 21, they say to Paul, "You are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to abandon Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or to live according to our customs." Now, obviously, Paul's in Jerusalem to carry out a custom, so that can't be totally true. Moreover, that is a misrepresentation to say that he's telling them to abandon Moses. Christ came not to abandon the law, but to fulfill the law. Not one stroke of the pen would disappear from the law. It was all intentional. It all served a purpose. It's not true that Paul was telling people to abandon Moses. In Romans chapter 10, you'll see that Paul uses Moses as the Old Testament sense of salvation. Those who do these things will live by them. And then the New Testament salvation comes through Jesus, through faith in Christ alone. So it's not true that he was telling people to abandon Moses. It is true that he was telling people that they don't have to circumcise their children, but even this would be a trumped up charge. You can see their personal preferences, their proclivity to adhere to Old Testament restrictions coming back, and they're judging Paul based on a false standard. That, I believe, is partially to blame for this charge that's brought up against Paul, saying he's telling people to abandon our law and forsake this place. These trumped up charges are going to be the foundation for what comes in this week's devotions. You're going to see that this riot, like the riot at the temple to Artemis, is totally based on false pretense. This is going to set the legal background for the rest of the book of Acts. This is where Paul's going to get thrown into Roman prison moving forward. But here's where you and I can apply it. People have been misrepresenting Christianity for millennia. In our modern sense, today, we're misrepresented as, for example, we're labeled bigots if we don't believe in transgender ideology. We're labeled as homophobic if we believe that Romans 1 is true, or 1 Corinthians 6 is true, or Genesis 18 and 19 are true. People have been mislabeling Christians for millennia, and the gospel has endured all of that. You want to be on the right side of history? Adhere to the word of history's author. Right, Stephen? This is the book of Acts. It's still happening today. Let's live it out together. Are you ready? Go.